Hello everyone, thank you so much for watching my channel. Thank you for 2,000 subscribers. That's a huge milestone in my career. And I know this doesn't sound like a huge number to some of you, but I managed to make a full-time career out of it. So thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. And thank you is just a bunch of words. So what am I actually gonna do to thank you? I'm actually going to show you something that I've never shown before. I'm going to show you a project of a track called Fooling Myself, which I made and released with Ridmic, which is a sub-label to Liquicity. This track got quite a lot of streams. It's a big one. It's on the year mix. Let's safely say it's around 1 million streams at the moment. Now let's hear this track a little bit and then look into the project. Still to this day, I really love this track. You can tell I'm still dancing to it. It's a fairly good track. I think it has its downsides. First of all, I think Liquicity didn't release the right version, so it has like a weirdly low volume. I think they released like a pre-mastered version or something like that, which is it makes me a little bit sad, but it's alright. I mean, the people don't even pay attention to that. Now let's talk about the track itself, alright? So I made this track as I had this like really cool idea of blending like let's say foghorn bass, more commonly used in rollers, with Liquicity type sounds. So I thought, is that even possible? And that was a challenge. And it did take a while to figure it out. There was like a couple of versions of this track, and I think this one really works. It hit the right spot. If you actually look into the project is very simple. So I think two things about this track that really like are the essence of it is the main idea and the workflow. So workflow is something that I managed to improve over the years, and it's something that I pass on to my students when I teach them, because I'm a full-time teacher now, you know that. So I help them to like get rid of the unimportant elements, and now I know how important this is. And this was one of the earlier tracks which had like a perfect or near perfect workflow, because you can see that the project is really small actually. There's a lot of layers of percussion. Like I think all of these are percussion layers. So if you remove all of my percussion layers, there's just like a couple of basses, a couple of arpeggios, and a few other samples here and there, and that's the whole track. It's really simple, it's really minimalistic, and I think that is the best approach to keep the sound really busy, really easy to comprehend, because the more things you put in your track, the harder it is for general audience to just, you know, keep up with what they're hearing. Keep in mind, most actual people who listen to music are not interested in like how the track was made. They just want to hear something that they can repeat in their head. So keep it fairly simple. That was the idea, but include that amazing foghorn thing. So it took a while, but yeah, I mean, once I figured out what I wanted, it was really easy. By the way, just so you know, most of the drums that I'm using in this video, I would say 99% of that, or actually 90%, because you can't, there's not too many to give it a 99, but around 90% of all these samples, including the kick, the snare, the driving percussions, are included in ARC sample packs, which the link will be in the description. I reinstated the website so you can keep buying them again. So let's look at the drums right now, and more importantly, like we will talk about the balance of these drums, like how they work with each other, like all the elements. So let me just play that drum loop in isolation so we don't hear anything else. That is the drum loop in this track. So now let's look at the kick drum and the snare drum. And I think the important part to keep in mind when creating drums like this is that your kick and snare are the loudest elements, but they also have to be like quite controlled, because if you make them too loud, the track will just scream like crazy. And let's actually play this and look at the numbers on master channel. You can see that even after I've added all the limiters and loudness changing stuff, it still barely like touches 0 dB, or maybe it does. But like, I just try to make sure it just doesn't go too crazy, because if I wanted to, I could probably push my kick and snare over a -6 dB and go like something like this. Like this is the kick, and now the snare, let's make it louder. And it probably would still be like not creating a lot of conflicts. Yeah, as you can hear, it's still playable, right? The point is that you don't want your drums to be super loud always. That is something that took a long time to learn, because I come from like, I was making like a liquid drum bass type of music for a long time. Then I transitioned to neurofunk. So that's a huge contrast. And in neurofunk, everything is really loud. So learning how to make drums for main stage was quite a task. So it's safe to say that now, like, I know 100% that you can make the drums a little bit quieter. They should be like powerful in their design, but not as powerfully mixed as in neurofunk. So I do -6 on both my kick and my snare, and then I send them to master channel, where everything is getting pushed up by, I think, like 4.3 dB. So the track is getting a little bit louder. Then I have Pro L2 in the aggressive mode, which also actually pushes the loudness a little bit. So let's say we're compensating these like +6 back, like this -6 back, but we're also pushing everything else +6. So the drums are not supposed to be actually loud relative to the synths and the basses. And there's this video on my channel, How to Pendulum in FL Studio, I think it's called. I explained that concept there as well, very nicely too, where you can actually, when you look into that project, you will notice how my snare is actually extremely small and quiet, but because it has like a huge white noise tail that is really loud on top of it, that is actually like a percussion layer. It makes it sound like the snare is just like really loud, which it physically isn't. So this is very important to understand, that your drums are perceived loud, but they're not actually physically loud. So you see, I pushed everything, I pulled everything down to like -6 right now. And the thing is, the drums actually sound better, even though they're not as loud, but everything is like in a really good context. So that is very important. Now let's look at the driving percussion. This is something that I also made a video about earlier. I think it's called Bring Joy to Lifeless Mix and driving percussion, something like that. So driving percussion is usually like a 1/4 of a speed type of a drum loop that just goes like not like any shakers in between, nothing like that. Usually you make that to give life to your mix. So there's 2 layers like that. Both of these layers, I think they're supposed to be in my sample packs. Well, this one for sure. This one also. Also pay attention that all of them are slightly different. They play a slightly different role. So this percussion creates like a lot of weird resonance. This one is for transients. And this third one is just for width and like mid-range or something like that. So I try to fill as much space in spectrum as possible with my driving percussion to, you know, to get the groove going, you know. So that's why I do this all the time. Now, the kick and the snare are so easy to place on top of a good driving percussion to make it sound nicely. You can just use addictive drums for that. Once again, guys, go back through the catalog of my videos. You will find a video. I will actually leave a link in the description to save your time. But this helps a lot, this driving percussion trick. The snare became a little bit more splashy. That was because I was touching gain in this video, which I shouldn't have done as much. Wait, let me remove that. Yeah, this is getting better. Yeah, it had a, like, the release was really loud because I limited it heavily. So one more thing that I added on top of it is a crash ride. This is not from my sample pack. This is from my older sample pack that is probably not on the website. But it's actually, I will show you how you can create something like this in FL Studio at least. There's this thing called legacy effects, I think. So let's just say I'm gonna download. I'm not gonna download. I'm just gonna get any sort of a ride. Oh, this is a bad one. Let me. Yeah, for example, this one. Who cares? So you can take a ride like that, and you can create a little modulation effect. If you go right here, there's this pre-computed effects target and RM frequency. That is what you need, and the mix. Yeah, this is how you can get this effect. Basically, take any ride and do this. If you're not using FL Studio, you can just do this with like any gator. Just don't go 100%. Go like 30-40%, and it will create like this crashed ride type of an effect. So it's fairly easy. I like how it sounds. This is something that I inherited from Neurofunk because I was doing Neurofunk like all the time. So let's talk about loudness of our percussion. So now you know that my kick and snare are -6, and this one I don't have a limiter on it, but it's actually really quiet. It's like -21. So if you're mixing to 0, that would be like -16, -15 actually. It's really quiet, but it's an unnecessary evil because it creates a lot of breathing space for the mix. So you can hear how important that is. So layering, like layering a lot of different drum elements is very, very important. But one more thing that is important is to create like the main hat. Main hat is usually the hat between the kicks and the snares. So to make the groove go kick, hat, snare, hat, kick, snare, hat. That little hat in between the kicks and the snares is what I call a main hat. And usually I like to use plain white noise for that. White noise always wins. Like if you choose like an actual hat. Oh, sorry, that's claps. Just give me a second. My camera is not letting me see. Yeah, if you choose like an actual hat like this instead of a white noise, there's a chance you're gonna lose a little bit of resonance or something like that. So I actually have a hat like that here. You can hear it. But it has a lot of emptiness inside of it because these, like, let's say real or pretending to be real cymbal hats, they have a lot of resonance, but also a lot of like dipped frequencies. And white noise compensates for that because white noise is literally the loudest sound out there. So, you know, you just have to make sure to clean out the low end because white noise will get out of hand. But high pass it and it will give you just enough noise so you can hear it right now. Wow, this is the weirdest way I've ever made this. You shouldn't actually create it like that. You can see that I chose FM from noise and put it on top of this. Like it's not how you're supposed to do this, but it's alright. I mean, you get the point. Just a LFO on a white noise. There's also a small pre-delay because I don't like when it goes a little too snappy. There's a little pre-delay right here. And that white noise is something that I use as a fundamental layer of my main hat, and then I can use a different hat on top. So there you go. And I also have one more to make it sound a little bit more organic. This one. So altogether we have 3 hats which work as a single main hat. Now let's hear all the drums combined. Turning on the kicks, the snares, the crash ride. If I remove the main hat though, it's really dull. The difference is huge. All right, so let's look at the loudness of the main hats. So this white noise is a little bit louder. I think it's around like minus 13 dB because I want it to be more present in the mix. This little one is here also on the 54th mixer track. This one I think I don't even... yeah, it's on a mixer track number 45. There's a soothe on it for some reason. I don't think you need it, honestly. Yeah, that's just a misjudgment, but it's all right. Like it's whatever. If it works, it works. So it's also quiet, really quiet. You can hear it. Like I don't even need to give you the number. It's like a minus 24, but I'm using this just for a little bit of like organic, tone. I want to add that to the hat because with the white noise and that closed hat, which are clearly both like synthesized, it just didn't sound like it was alive or something like that. So that was the process in my head. I wanted like fairly organic drums. This is why I'm using addictive drums for like those driving percussions. So those like driving percussion layers, usually I use a limiter on them because they tend to have huge resonant peaks. But you don't actually need them. You need the feeling of fullness of the mix, like a brick wall mix. So most of the time I'm trying to limit that, but you can see I'm not actually doing a lot of limiting. There's no limiting here because these drums seem to be working well. Let me look into this though. Yeah, it seems all right. There is a little bit of you can see like if you actually close up, there are a few imperfections there. You can see there's like peaks that are going almost, let's say, 3-4 dBs louder, but it doesn't affect the mix as much, so I kept it like that. It's fine. Sometimes it goes like 10 dB or like 15 dB louder, and that is hard to mix. You are generally looking to have a more brickwall mix, so you want brickwall percussion. So if your percussion is like very jumpy, like it's very loud here, very quiet here, you want it to be more brickwall. So you will normally like saturate that shit, or you will limit it, which is what I do. And I think the fact that people don't use limiter in 2024 is just absolutely crazy. It's nuts. It's the best thing you can use. A limiter is literally the best mixing instrument in the world, and saturating works too, but sometimes to get that brickwall out of a saturator, you have to really change the tone of the sound. You reshape the sound heavily. But with limiter, you don't have to do that. You just put the ceiling on your drum line and you don't let the percussions jump like in volume louder than the limits that you set for them. So that is a perfect brick wall. It's almost like it's like a brick wall compressor, essentially. That's what it is. Now let's finish with the drums. I think the drums here are fairly simple. Also, I think most of these drums are available on my Heavy Hitters Drum and Bass Volume 1 probably, but I'm not 100% sure. I think yeah, I think this is the sample pack where you can get both the snare and... Isn't this the snare? No? Well, I'm not 100% sure. Not 100% sure it's on this one, but like, as you heard, those drums are very similar, if not better. I don't really think this snare here is a great snare particularly. It just worked for this track somehow. So these are the drums, and now next thing I want to do is I want to look into the bass line. So let's do that. Aha! This is not a bass line. This is another percussion layer that I completely forgot about. Now, this is awesome that I clicked on it. This is what I call like a kick snare swing. This is sometimes that I do with some of my tracks. It's a very simple white noise to make like a little bit of like percussion. But nowadays I don't even practice this anymore. I don't know. I just don't. It just sounds really dirty, you know. I'm not sure this should be in the track. It is there though. You just saw how it's made. Like you can try. This is something I picked up from Imano, I think. This is how the processing looks. It's also not really loud. It's there to support the kick and snare. -9 or something like that. Honestly, not a big fan of this nowadays. I think this made the track a little bit more noisy, so sometimes it does work though, so you can try. So yeah, the bass lines. Finally, the bass lines. Where are they? Let's hear them. There you go. They are really basic, to be honest. So let's start with a sub-focus mid-bass. Why sub-focus? Well, the answer is really simple, because in Sub-Focus's tutorial of solar systems, he taught us to use Icon Has Kick. And this is something that I used here to create this like crunchy kick type of a mid-bass. I can see through processing it has like limited high-end information. So I'm using like a thermal preset here called Angry Doberman. This is something I still do till today. I really like to use Icon Has Kicks, but I honestly like I experiment because I don't like how they sound when it's a clear wavetable. It's just a clean wavetable. It's so overused that I just go and wave shape them until they sound slightly different. This is pretty cool. So this is like my trick. OTT also not the best idea. Could cause like phasing issues. Shouldn't have used that probably, but also creates a lot of noise. But this track was generally really noisy. I don't think its mix down is particularly as clean as I want it to be. One thing that is important though, this track, this sound is really clean from the low end. I clean it here and I clean the low end here also. So below 100 hertz, definitely like nothing, and then there's like still like a little bit of like a steep curve. So I would say the only I would say like the frequencies recover around like 150 to 100 hertz. So I gave a lot of space to my sub bass in this regard. By the way, the volume of this sound is around -13. I still use this similar estimate right now. Now let's look at the sub bass. It's a harmonized sub bass, so there's like a few harmonics added here to make it a little bit more powerful. Then I removed some of like frequencies below 30 hertz. Then this like 255 harmonic, I boosted it a bit. This is actually quite a underappreciated technique, like just boosting some of the harmonics on your bass with a very wide bell curve. That really seems to change the sound a lot. And sometimes like I even like with one of my clients recently, we found out that he had like missing harmonics around 100 hertz just because I have this habit of like putting an equalizer on my sub bass, creating a bell curve and just walking around like this. And then suddenly, boom, his track drops much better because it turns out that he had like missed harmonics around 100 hertz. So seems to work here as well, just a little bit higher to 150 or something. Kickstart for sidechaining, so that's pretty heavy A sidechain there. And the limiter, so the loudness of the sub bass is around -12, -11.6, but also don't forget it's boosted on master around 6 dB, so it's gonna be like -5 or something, -5.6, something like that. It slightly varies from track to track. I usually have my sub bass like the loudest I get is like -9.6 and the quietest like -12.5. This is like sometimes even quieter. It depends on the track. But I also compensate by 6 dB or something like that on master channel, sometimes even more. So those are my estimates, but it's not something that everybody would do. So yeah, the most important and the most juicy layer one is the one called bass number 3, is this one. Oh, this layer has so much going on. Oh my god. And I don't even know like if there's need for half of these things right here. So this bass, if you turn off all the effects and turn them on one by one, it's a very basic synth. There's like an FM modulation from this B oscillator. The way this sound is formed is from creating oscillator difference. So our sawtooth is -2 octaves. So is our sub here. Also, don't remove the sub. Even if you remove the low end from the sound with like high pass, this still makes a lot of difference because it's programmed into the harmonics of the sound. So that sub, well, it doesn't really make a difference here, to be honest, before the effects at least. It could make a difference. So sometimes I like to keep like my sub in and then just cut it with a EQ because I need a separate sub anyway. But yeah, this is like a folk horn sound. It's very simple. Nothing much to talk about here. So the level is controlled. There's a little bit of a notch filter because I was trying to create slightly like a slightly creative movement with the filter. It could be like a different preset as well. It wouldn't create a huge difference. Well, maybe it would. But I just tried to add a little bit of a nuance, which I don't even hear, to be fair. But yeah, whatever. So there's like a low pass filter over here. Just one more low pass filter. We already have level filters over here, but the feeling of the low pass going wow is what is the essence of the sound. So like I really wanted that. We also have a distortion hard clipper, and you can see that I'm using the same LFO to control everything. That's how you can like have a controlled folk horn, because otherwise if you like didn't control it, your sound wouldn't fade in. It wouldn't like fade out and fade in well enough because the distortion would be like distracting the sound. So sounds pretty good. There's a lot of reverb, also like really dirty reverb. I wouldn't recommend doing anything like that. I think I've improved from that point on, but it still kind of works. So it's a very basic synth. Just watch the dumbest, like the most simplified jump up tutorials, and you'll learn how to do something like that already. The only difference being like here I'm using portamento, so it can slide away a little bit. That's what I was looking for. Next thing you will find is me using thermal. This is a preset called harmonic tremolo. It has like a tremolation, but I managed to reduce it because it had like a really crazy tremolo effect that just didn't cut it with this sound. So I think it's edited. I don't exactly remember how, and also it's not 100%. It's around like around 50%. So basically like parallel compression or what? Not compression, parallel distortion or something like that. Vocodex, why I like this plugin and why I'm using this one here is because it creates a little bit of that vacuum style sound. The sound becomes really firm. So it's almost like screaming too much right now. So I'm gonna make it a little bit quieter because my ODZs are very sensitive. So you can see that the sound is very firm, very focused in the center. It's like Vocodex does weird stuff. It harmonizes the basses in a very unpredictable way. Until this day, I actually haven't looked into how vocoders really work, and I think this is something that I still am to learn more about. But I kind of get what they do, so I know how to apply them. So that doesn't really matter. So there's a lot of wave shaper to make more distortion on this sound. So now it starts to have a character, like you can compare before and after. It has a little bit of that, like a small distortion. The harmonics start distorting heavily. And So the task ahead of me was like, I have to clean the sound up now because it's so fucking dirty. And that's the story of the track. Everything is really dirty. It's really loud. So took a while. But yeah, you can see that I'm cutting out some low frequencies with the next EQ move. It's still so screamy, and I'm trying to suppress a little bit of that screaminess. Like subconsciously, I always think that if my sound is screaming, the screamingness comes from 4,500 hertz. So like I try to fix it. You can read about that. 4,500 hertz. Read on that. It's thought to be the frequency of baby screams, and it's like that's why human really dislike it. So I tried to clean it, but I didn't quite cut it. So I had to introduce soothe and clean more. And that's where it starts to get a bit better. Then I did a bit of a sidechain, more high pass, some limiting. Yes, finally. You can already see that this is kind of like a brick wall sound because of all the distortions. And because the soothe is controlling the sound, but still sounded too screamy, so I added another soothe to remove some high end. I think I didn't do it the right way, but it is what it is. The track worked, it got signed, so I mean, seems to have worked for this track. This is like how I created this little mid bass. Let me close everything up. Okay, awesome. So at the moment, what we have is the bass line like that. Oh shit, I turned everything off, right? Let me get back into it. There's also a few weird like bass synths here and there. It's called trance bass. It's I don't know. It's basically like very unprofessional sound. Anyone can make something like that. It's very simple. I have a few of those here and there. Just jumping into the out of nowhere, just in the groove. Maybe here as well. Yeah, it's the same one, I think. Yeah, I think it's the same one. So it's not a big deal. It's just make sure that it's not like louder than your actual mids and subs combined, because it's gonna stand out too far from everything else in the mix. Same with the drums, right? Because you don't want your drums to be actually physically too loud compared to your basses. Just because you can push something louder doesn't mean you have to. Because in the end, you can keep your drums slightly down, and in the end you can take like the master channel and push everything up, and now you have loud drums and a good mix. Everything is also loud compared to the drums. So that's what I'm kind of preaching. So the next thing in this track is the arpeggio, but I think this arpeggio thing, it's already like taking us back to the idea of the track. So let's talk a little bit about the idea of the actual track, how it came together, and all of that. So the idea of this track was like, once again, like it was to create like a foghorn with like a Liquicity style. So I needed to find something to work off of. And I started by buying a guitar sample that sounds like this. This is literally like the starting point of the track. I just knew I had to form this into like a foghorn track somehow. So just playing this many times and trying to find the right low pad note, which is something that I use in my intros a lot. Just a basic Reese bass with like cut out low ends. I came up with this chord. And next thing would be to create an arpeggio, and people often ask me like, why? How do you like come up with the arpeggio? Like, why is it sometimes? Because sometimes I start my tracks with arpeggios. Um, I think I picked it up when I was making orchestral music because I also create like hybrid trailer music. So in orchestra, a lot of things, a lot of tracks are created based off like a cool staccato, or like, yeah, basically like a fast staccato arpeggio on strings going like da 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 don da 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 don da 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 don da 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 don, and that's when you're like, okay, I'm getting in the mood for music, and you start like kind of building the song on top of that. So I usually try to have like either like an arpeggio in the beginning or like another key element that can work together to create sort of a mood, set the mood for what's to come next. So in this case, I had this guitar, and I wanted to create a little bit of suspense for that guitar by providing it with a really cool arpeggio. So I did this. Very simple, but works very effectively. To make an arpeggio like that, you don't even need to be skilled at all. Like, this is a very basic sawtooth with a little bit of a harmonic move. You can see it's slightly weird. A bit of chorus, a bit of EQing, so I remove some high and adding a little bit of delay and reverb. Also, it's really funny, but when I submitted this track the first time, Ridmic told me to remove the high end from the delay on this arpeggio. So originally I had it sound something like that, but they told me that there was too much high end delay, and I was like, whoa, that was so specific, it blew me away. So I kind of like low passed the delay feedback a bit. Like, you can barely even hear the delay anymore, but I mean, I just noticed that that's what Liquicity kind of like, so it's like +1 knowledge. So yeah, whatever, not a big problem for me. I added like a Cashmere downsweep sample here that I bought from Splice as well. Created a little bit of a reverse sound. Usually I create these sounds from like pads, but in this track I created the pad and the reverse pad and the intro from the arpeggio. I will show you how you can do this. Wow, this is pretty awesome. Shouldn't be that loud, by the way. So I use this Edison thing to create like real, what do you call it, like a really blurred, like stretched out pad version of anything, and that's how I come about with all those weird things. So let me just try and show you instead of talking. This is not a helpful talk. Edison, record. So we record this stuff, then there's this option called blur. You go amount, offset, whatever, accept. So now if I put this into playlist, you will notice that I have a really cool stretched pad sound from that arpeggio. Let's just normalize it to give it some loudness. So this is how you create those reverse thingies. This is also how I came up with this stuff. It's a very simple technique and it's very effective. Now let's talk about loudness, all right? Usually if you're... there's two ways of measuring loudness. You can measure like a sound by sound, or what you can also do is you can look at how loud are the intros in other tracks and compare against the loudness of intro of your track. So you can basically like open an empty project, put like a Pro L on the master channel, drop in like a sub-focus track and see like, okay, so his intro is like -11 LUFS and the drop is like -5.5. So I gotta consider that. So that is, I think, like a more effective way. So I don't think you really need to look at the loudness of like how loud this sound versus like this sound is. It's more like it can be whatever, but you just want to make sure that the general loudness of the intro is a little bit lower than the drop, because the drop is more powerful. Second, also important thing to consider, your actual intro differs from your actual drop. There's only two like main things that really differ, is the amount of sub bass and the amount of sometimes mids as well, and the amount of high end. But like a lot of people don't understand that. So if you actually give away like too much low end information in your intros and build up, your drop is not going to have the same effect of explosion. Even though some really creative artists manage to make it work sometimes, I just don't think that generally this is a good practice for all your tracks. Even if you're that artist and if you've done that before, the chance is that it's not going to work again. So I would say this is more of an exception than a rule. So as a rule, I would say try to make sure you avoid very heavy low ends, because your next question will be like, how do I make like the track more warm because I have no low end in my intro? What is it supposed to consist of? Well, you can have low end, just don't put that sub bass there, because you can hear this like intro low pad right here. It does have like low end. It's fairly like, it's quite a lot as well. It's like from 60 to 300. But when the track drops, the difference is actually really big. To like, you notice it. Boom. So that's what you want. You want to maintain the contrast. So even in this like build up right here, if you actually listen to the build up, you can hear that I actually have a mid bass right here. But this mid bass is very smart because it doesn't have a lot of low end. Yeah, you can see I'm cutting off a little bit here, I'm cutting off a little bit here. I make sure that it's just fat enough in terms of like subs and low mids to kind of create the suspense and the feeling of something heavy to come, but it actually doesn't have that like heavy low end information, because otherwise the drop would not work. So keeping all those things in mind, let's listen to this track one more time. It's a fake bass. It's a fake bass. There's no real bass in there. The real bass is about to come. Now you can hear the power of the drop. By the way, this kick drum was affected by this kick drum in like the build-up was affected by me changing something in the limiter. So it was not like that. And the original track, I think it was kind of like this. This is also like important because right now you could hear that this kick drum is very loud, and like the drop doesn't seem to drop as powerful because of that, because you already gave the explosion. It's like, if there's like two bomb explosions, the one that makes you shit the most is the first one. The second one is already expected, kind of. So don't do that. Make the first explosion in the drop. So you see I'm pulling back some of the loudness on that kick drum. Just a little bit. The percussion, the drums, everything is a little bit quieter. And now that's where the track opens up. There's like a crash. There's like everything going on there. So What else is there to talk about in this track? Well, the vocal is from Splice, so it's not a big deal. Well, usually they have a really good mixing. This track was a little this particular vocal was a little bit too wide and had too much low end dirt, so I had to remove a little bit of that. I had to, you can see side information, I had to remove that. I added a bit of chorus to make it a little bit more wide, but also to make it more Robswire-y. I just like that. Or maybe that's because it's a background layer. Yeah, it's actually... Yeah, that's actually... I'm lying. I only use that amount of chorus for the second layer. So, yeah, there's a lot of like shimmer, also quite badly mixed. There's a chorus too. Yeah, I'm using chorus too. Like I'm using both on the original layer and the background layer. Right. Sorry, I don't remember all of that anymore. But I still try to keep it fairly mid ranged. So like I don't want like the sides to go crazy in mid range. I just want it to be like a little bit centered. So that's why my layer is like quite fixated on like cutting off the stereo from the mid-range, so I just wanted to keep it a little bit more mono. A bit of chorus, a bit of OTT. Actually, OTT seems to work quite well on the vocals sometimes. I noticed that. Very similar styles of mixing, so just two different samples. I created a little bit of a vocoder carrier to make the harmonics. I think this is a suggestion by Ridmic. You can hear it right now. I'm just repeating the chords of the track. It's a pretty gentle trick. But it does give that Fox Stevenson / Pendulum type of a vibe, so I think it's a reasonable ask on their behalf. Yeah, and one more thing that the drop wouldn't work without is this little sound right here. This is basically the trick that I've shown before, where I opened the Edison and I created the blurred version of the vocal. The reason why I use this is because, generally speaking, electronic music suffers from lack of information in the mid-range, especially in the drop, because it's so heavily accented on the bass and the high ends, just going... But as a result of that, you just don't know what to put there in the mid-range. And one may say that, but you got the arpeggio. But arpeggio, is it really like mid-range? I don't think it is. Well, yeah, all right, it is mid-range, but it just doesn't give enough information. It's just still weak. So I add this stuff over here. It goes like heavier on the mid-range, a bit on the high end as well, but who the fuck cares? Like, you can stack as many high-end samples on top of each other as you want. You don't really pay that much attention to this sound in the drop. You actually don't at all until I tell you this. But now, knowing this information, listen to this again. If I remove it, the drop is instantly dull. Oh, the soul is gone. Just quickly gonna run through the arrangement decision. While working with tunnel vision with Boris, we learned that nowadays the drops are a little bit shorter than they used to be before. They seem to be around 3 drop parts, so A, B, and C, as opposed to like in 2010s it used to be like maybe 4 drop parts. So like this track is fairly short. You can see A part of the drop, B, C. So the way that this track is made is that the B part is the lyrical one. It creates like a small it's like a small relaxation area between the A and C part of the drop, which are similar, but their purpose is to make the person dance. But right here in the middle, you just give it a small break and then like back to like dancing. Then there's like a little bit of a breakdown, a very simple breakdown also. I'm using like some sample from Splice here to just create like a little bit of like a breakbeat movement. Then like a small piano. It's the Labs by Spitfire. One more suggestion that Liquicity asked me to do for them was to create like chops, vocal chops in the intro. Sorry, in the breakdown. So I made this, and that's how the breakdown sounds essentially. All drums, look at this, all drums. I put every drum element into one group and I made a low pass. Look at this. Something that I learned from my friend Codex like 2 years ago. He's like the guy who makes commercial music and stuff like that. So he told me like, yeah, just fucking do this. Like, this is gonna make your breakdown sound more professional. If you take all of your drums together, group them, and low pass them, just such a cool trick. And it seems to work. I really love using this nowadays. So there's like a little bit of that breakbeat in the background. There's also like a little pad here, which is just a sample I bought on Splice. Seems to work really well. So the second drop is very similar to the first one. But that is the idea. I like how it sounds the same. I kind of don't feel the need for this track to be like too creative. It's pretty cool as it is. It needed to be this conservative, like very similar groovy track. But now, one more thing that I wanted to show you guys is that I have a bass switch right here that you might want to learn about. Oh yeah. So this is actually the same bass. It's called main long. It's the same bass that I used. The only difference is that I switched the 7th note to the 4th one. You can see it. It's a very common practice for every jump pop artist or something like that. So like folk horn wise, this was a logical decision to make the bass sound slightly different. So this is how they turned out. There's like a weird lead sound that I'm using here somewhere. No idea. This is... Don't ask me, like, I don't know how this came about. Sometimes you just throw stuff in there and it seems to work, and I think that was the case. No reason for any of that whatsoever. But yeah, I mean, this is the breakdown of the track. Let's look at the master. So let's talk a little bit about what I'm using on the master channel right here. So Endless Smile is just this effect right here for the intro. This one. It's like basically like an upsweep. Very, very popular little plugin, so no need to talk about it. It's one of the most popular out there. For different high passes, low passes, switches. I think I bought it together with the sausage fattener for like $30-40 on a discount sales. I don't remember exactly. Also in this mix, I still felt like a little bit of harmonics missing, so I added like an EQ to emphasize the mix a bit. You see, it sounds a bit dull without it. Now let me turn it back on. So this is basically my EQ to cut off all the stereo information from below 100 Hertz, just making sure that the track is mono compatible on the low end. Yeah, cutting out a little bit of that low end, a little bit of super high end with that saturated EQ. Spam plus just for general information, we don't need it. Soft clipper to make sure the drums cut through. Compensating for the low volumes in my drums and everything else with my limiter, and Pro L to add a little bit of volume with the aggressive preset, but also to check what is my LUFS. I think this track is supposed to be a bit louder. Yeah, but it's also a pre-mastered version, so it's completely fine. Oh, this one is -6 because I sent it for pre-masters. So that's the track. That's literally all there is to know about it. If there's anything that I might have missed, you can ask me in the commentary section. I'm gonna gladly respond to you. Guys, if you like what you're seeing, if you like my method of breaking things down, reach out to me. I still have some spots. I'm happily accepting new students. My Discord is going to be in the comments. Don't hesitate to talk to me. At least send me your demo. Let me give you a review. Send it to our community. There's a lot of people who go back and forth reviewing each other's shit, trying to... We have a good community, guys. Join us. Just join us. It's gonna be a lot of fun. So, once again, my boys and girls, thank you so much for 2,000 subscribers on this channel. I can't thank you enough. And see you around.